Donald Trump stormed into office on a wave of populist anger, promising to restore America to its former glory. His rallying cry, "Make America Great Again." From day one, his presidency was laser-focused on reviving the American economy, even if it meant turning the global trade order on its head. He vowed to bring back manufacturing jobs, renegotiate trade deals he deemed unfair, and stand up to economic rivals like China. His supporters cheered, eager for an end to years of economic anxiety. Trump's vision for economic renewal was rooted in protectionism. He believed that decades of globalization had hollowed out the American middle class, sending jobs overseas and enriching foreign powers at America's expense. His solution was simple: erect barriers to trade, slap tariffs on imports, and force American companies to bring production back home. This message resonated deeply with many Americans, particularly in the industrial heartland that had been hit hard by factory closures and job losses. They saw Trump as a fighter, someone who would finally put America first after years of being taken advantage of by its trading partners. He tapped into a deep well of frustration and resentment, promising to restore America's economic dominance and return the country to its former glory. Trump's message struck a chord with millions of Americans who felt left behind by globalization. The decline of manufacturing, the loss of well-paying jobs, and the rise of economic inequality had created a sense of unease and resentment among many working-class families. They yearned for a return to a time when America was the undisputed economic powerhouse of the world, when a factory job could provide a middle-class lifestyle. Trump's promise to make America great again was more than just a campaign slogan. It was a powerful appeal to nostalgia, a yearning for a bygone era of American prosperity and dominance. He tapped into a deep vein of economic nationalism, arguing that America had been taken advantage of by its trading partners for too long. He promised to rewrite the rules of global trade, to put American workers first, and to restore America to its rightful place at the top of the economic food chain. This message resonated particularly strongly in the Rust Belt, where decades of factory closures and job losses had left deep economic scars. Trump's promise to bring back manufacturing jobs was music to the ears of many in these struggling communities. They saw him as a savior, someone who would finally fight for them and their interests after years of neglect by both Democrats and Republicans. True to his word, President Trump wasted little time in upending the global trade order. He withdrew the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico, and imposed tariffs on goods from China, the European Union, and other trading partners. These actions sent shockwaves through the global economy, sparking fears of a trade war and a potential global recession. Trump argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair foreign competition. He accused China in particular of currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, and other predatory trade practices. He vowed to use tariffs as leverage to force China to change its ways and level the playing field for American businesses. However, these tariffs came at a cost. American businesses that relied on imported goods saw their costs rise, forcing them to raise prices for consumers or absorb the losses themselves. Consumers, in turn, faced higher prices for everything from washing machines to cars. The tariffs also disrupted global supply chains, creating uncertainty and volatility in the markets. As the trade war escalated, so too did the uncertainty in the global economy. Businesses became hesitant to invest, consumers pulled back on spending, and the stock market experienced wild swings. The CNN Fear and Greed Index, a closely watched gauge of market sentiment, remained stuck in fear territory for months, reflecting the growing anxiety among investors. The tariffs, coupled with the Trump administration's unpredictable trade policies, created a climate of uncertainty that rippled through the global economy. Businesses were unsure of what to expect next, making it difficult to plan for the future. This uncertainty led to a decline in business investment, as companies opted to hold on to their cash rather than risk it on new projects. Consumers, too, were feeling the pinch. Rising prices for everyday goods and services, combined with the uncertainty surrounding the trade war, led to a decline in consumer confidence and spending. This decline in consumer spending, which accounts for roughly 70% of the U.S. economy, further dampened economic growth. Beyond the immediate economic impact, the trade war also took a toll on America's reputation as a reliable trading partner and a safe haven for investment. Allies started to question America's commitment to free trade and the rules-based international order. Investors, too, grew wary of the United States' unpredictable policies and, honestly, the potential for further economic turmoil. The trade war strained relationships with key allies like Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. These countries, long considered close trading partners of the United States, suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of tariffs and protectionist policies. In response, they imposed retaliatory tariffs of their own, which, just escalated the trade tensions even more. This tit-for-tat tariff battle really undermined the rules-based trading system that had governed global commerce for decades. It also raised questions about America's commitment to free trade and its willingness to abide by international agreements. All this uncertainty made investors nervous, as they worried about the potential for further trade conflicts and economic instability. American businesses caught in the crossfire of the trade war found themselves grappling with higher costs, disrupted supply chains, and shrinking profits. Major retailers like Walmart and Target warned of potential price hikes and shortages. Small businesses, often lacking the resources of their larger counterparts, struggled to cope with the added burden of tariffs. The tariffs had a ripple effect throughout the U.S. economy, impacting businesses of all sizes and across various sectors. Manufacturers faced higher costs for imported raw materials and components, forcing them to raise prices for their products or absorb the losses. Retailers, facing higher costs from their suppliers, passed those costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Small businesses, in particular, were hit hard by the tariffs. They often lacked the bargaining power of larger corporations and were less able to absorb the increased costs. Many small businesses were forced to raise prices, cut costs, or even close their doors altogether. The economic data painted a bleak picture. Consumer sentiment plummeted to its lowest level in decades. Inflation expectations soared, raising fears of a return to the stagflation of the 1970s. The stock market, after years of record highs, experienced bouts of volatility and decline. The trade war, it seemed, was taking its toll on the American economy. The economic indicators were flashing red. Consumer confidence, a key driver of economic growth, plummeted as Americans grew increasingly worried about the trade war and its impact on their wallets. Inflation, long dormant, began to rear its ugly head as tariffs pushed up the prices of imported goods. The stock market, which had been on a tear for years, experienced a series of sharp declines as investors grew increasingly concerned about the trade war's impact on corporate profits and global economic growth. The bond market, often seen as a barometer of investor sentiment, also flashed warning signs, with yields on long-term bonds falling to historic lows as investors sought safety in government debt. Economists and business leaders alike sounded the alarm, warning that the trade war was a dangerous gamble that could backfire spectacularly. Nobel laureate Paul Krugman cautioned that the tariffs were a self-inflicted wound that would harm American consumers and businesses. Billionaire investor Ken Griffin warned that America's reputation as a safe haven for investment was eroding. The chorus of warnings from economists and business leaders grew louder as the trade war dragged on. They argued that the tariffs were counterproductive, hurting American consumers and businesses more than they were helping. They cautioned that the trade war was creating uncertainty and volatility in the global economy, which could ultimately lead to a recession. They also warned that the trade war was damaging America's reputation as a reliable trading partner and a safe haven for investment. They argued that the tariffs were alienating allies and emboldening rivals, undermining the rules-based international order that had benefited the United States for decades. As the trade war raged on, it deepened the political divisions within the United States and strained relations with key allies. Public opinion polls showed a nation divided on the tariffs, with some supporting Trump's tough stance on trade and others expressing concern about the economic consequences. Meanwhile, the global economy teetered on the brink, with the International Monetary Fund warning of a synchronized slowdown. The question on everyone's mind was whether the trade war would tip the world into recession. The trade war became a political lightning rod, further polarizing an already divided nation. Supporters of the tariffs argued that they were necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair foreign competition. They applauded Trump's tough stance on trade, arguing that he was finally standing up for American interests. Opponents of the tariffs countered that they were hurting American consumers and businesses more than they were helping. They argued that the tariffs were raising prices, disrupting supply chains, and creating uncertainty in the global economy. They warned that the trade war could ultimately lead to a recession, both in the United States and abroad. The world watched with bated breath as the trade war played out, uncertain of what the ultimate consequences would be. The global economy, already facing headwinds from slowing growth and geopolitical tensions, was particularly vulnerable to the disruptive effects of a prolonged trade war. The stakes were high and the outcome remained uncertain.